Welcome to Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange community, where leading practitioners in integrative health approaches will discuss how they solve the most challenging and common health issues. These regular Q&A discussions are designed to take a deep dive into case studies and integrative approaches in order to elevate the collective knowledge of both experienced and new practitioners alike. Biocanic's Health Intelligence Exchange, your community for functional medicine.
All right. Welcome to the Health Intelligence Exchange, everyone. I'm Jeremy Malecha, CEO of Biocanic, and today I'm joined by our guest, Bradley Davie from InBody, discussing how you can track health data using body composition. Bradley Davie is a well-rounded expert in Bachelor's in Kinesiology in Physical Education from the University of Maine. He has worked as a health coach since 2011, helping clients achieve holistic health goals. Bradley holds certificates from the National Academy of Sports Medicine as a personal trainer, Corrective Exercise Specialist, and certified nutrition coach, as well as a holistic health certification from the Chek Institute. Additionally, he has training in Neurolinguistics Programming, life coaching, and executive coaching, equipping him to help clients overcome barriers and achieve optimal health and well-being. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Bradley. So let's hear a little bit more about your background. That's quite a breadth of experience and training.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. I think that kind of takes care of like my upbringing and my personal journey leading to into the field of health and wellness. And I've been at InBody now for almost 9 years, where we manufacture body composition analyzers, blood pressure monitors, grip strength, software, apps, and it all integrates together. So I've had the experience to be able to come and now start working within businesses and with executives and helping people to really understand how this kind of tech can fit in their business. So that's been kind of like the next iteration of what you shared, because I think that bio comes from my own personal health coaching website. And I also run a health coaching company as well, where I just kind of speak to the soul of people and help people connect with themselves and their own journey with their vision and the harmony in their life, or helping grow resilience or nourish their bodies. And it kind of fits seamlessly into InBody because it's a tool that I use, and I'm really good at selling it. So and like marketing and talking to cool people like you. So thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Awesome. Well, it's always great having practitioners on who also work in kind of the corporate industry perspective as well. So it kind of gives you a unique perspective, both as a practitioner, but then also, coming from the technology side. But I'd love to really dig into the technology around body composition. So as most people have been aware, the whole, discussion around weight loss, semaglutide, the impact on muscle mass and fat loss and weight loss. So maybe let's just start at kind of the basic principles. What is, let's for the audience, what is body composition testing and analysis, and how does that compare to just doing like a weight measurement?
Well, I don't think I'm ever going to get through a podcast episode, whether it's my own or somebody else's, without GLP-1s coming up. It hasn't happened in the last few years. But it's right up our alley, and it's helped us grow significantly in our business. But yeah, I think a lot of people knew that BMI and weight are not really the best way for us to measure our health risk. That was something that insurance companies came out to say in the beginning, hey, we need an easy way to measure somebody's risk so we can maybe appropriately attach a value to them. And we're just going to divide the weight by the height, and we're going to have this BMI value. And that doesn't really appropriately show us much. So we really want to go beyond the BMI and beyond the weight on the scale. And we want to show a breakdown of like, how much muscle does somebody have, or more simply, how much lean mass do they have? And then within that lean mass, how much of it is muscle, bone, water, extracellular water, body fat, visceral fat, and we even do it by segment. So the way that our technology does it is different than anybody else in the marketplace in the bioelectric impedance space. So essentially what happens when somebody does a test, they sit down, take their shoes and socks off, anything out of their pockets. We want to be in lightweight clothing. And then you wipe your hands and your feet, preferably your hands first and then your feet, but it's up to you. And then, you step onto the scale, and there's 2 electrodes for each foot. And then basically the scale has 3 parts. There's a scale portion, a tower, and then there's arms that come off it. And at the top of the tower, there's an LCD screen, and you enter an ID on that, which just stores the profile. And that's what also carries up to the cloud and to the app, so we can sync that data through. And then you enter height and weight, or no, you don't enter weight. Sorry, the weight is automatically come through. You enter height, age, and gender. Height's the only variable that you enter that can impact the results. Age and gender won't impact the results. We could change it, and we could do 2 tests back to back if we wanted, and you'd still get the same raw data. The reference ranges that they're plotted against might be different because of age or for gender. But height, if you were to, for anybody that's doing this, if you were to say that you were taller than you actually are, it would stretch your data out so you would appear to be leaner. Where if I said I was shorter, I would have fatter results on the result sheet. So accurate height measurement is one of the most important things to do. And we actually have a Bluetooth integrated height stadiometer, where it's a companion tool next to the body composition analyzers, and you can stand on it. One of them is automatic. A bar comes down, touches the top of your head, and then it'll send that data to the body composition analyzer, and it'll already be in there when you get to the scale. And the same thing also for us happens with blood pressure and grip strength, so that can all integrate together. And then in addition, on the ecosystem, we also came out with a touch screen, like a companion result sheet touch screen, that where you can see your results on there. And then we're coming out with some other tools, like a fall risk assessment, kind of a balance tool as well. So, but overall, within the BIA space, what happens when you stand on the scale, it sends small, safe electrical currents through your body. And they happen at 1 kilohertz, 5 kilohertz, 50, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Based upon the model that we offer, some of them are simpler and fewer, and then some of them are more. With the simpler ones, we see more simple values like weight, lean mass, fat mass, muscle, water, more on a general total body level. And then as we go up in models, we start to get more details, like we separate the intra and extracellular water, or we start to see visceral fat or phase angle. Phase angle is like a cellular health and cellular integrity score. We can see protein, mineral scores, bone mineral content, body cell mass. So the data can get pretty granular. So I think perhaps in your functional integrative medicine space and medical clinics, I think our 580 or our 970 model tends to be, 580 tends to be a sweet spot. But if you're really looking for all the data we can offer, the 970 gets pretty granular with that. But otherwise, it's simple, easy to use. The whole test time takes, like, from start taking your shoes off to putting your shoes back on, probably 3 to 5 minutes. The actual test time is anywhere from like 30 to 45 seconds. And then you get a full page printout of all kinds of different metrics, and it's pretty easy to read. And then some people can do some really cool things with it, and they can bring it into their own platform and show it alongside of other metrics too.
Yeah, it's awesome. And definitely, I mean, when we did the integration with InBody, it was amazing how quickly people adopted that integration. And, there's so much great information. So I want to get a little bit more into the specific parameters on some of the key metrics, right? So clearly everybody's familiar with weight, body fat, but maybe kind of going into visceral body fat, and then maybe talk to that intra and extracellular water values and how people would use them in clinical practice.
Well, I think most people want to see the split between fat mass and lean mass first. That's where we can go, because the the lean mass is going to be made up of your bone, muscle, and water. And we want to make sure we're preserving lean mass, whether as we're aging or if we're starting to do a treatment like a GLP-1 or a hormone replacement, or I'm starting to exercise or I'm changing my diet, that can impact first our lean mass. Your lean mass is like typically, it could, on a healthy male or female, could be like 80% of your body. But when we break it down, that lean mass from bone, muscle, and water, if we're just isolating the water portion of that, typically water makes up about 73.3% of your lean mass. So that means everything that is not body fat, 73.3% of that is water. So from there, we can then split that again, and we can say how much of that water is inside the bones and muscles and like metabolically active there. Not that outside the cells is not, but there's a cycle there of how the water, we bring water into our body, into the cells, use it in our metabolism and take it back out. And the rest of the water is outside in your blood or your skin or your lymphatic system. And what we do is we get a snapshot of where that is at each time somebody comes and does this test. So a lot of people in clinical practice, we want to just make sure we have enough muscle so we can see how much intracellular water somebody has. Another part of that lean mass is the dry lean mass, which would be the actual dry portion of like the protein and the minerals. So we show intracellular water and dry lean mass would be a great way to see how much muscle somebody has. And we report those all separately. But then the other part of it is water outside the cells and tracking that. So a lot of people would call that something like edema, sometimes inflammation. I think related to water, edema is probably a more accurate way to think about it. But most of the time, water outside the cells is about 36 to 39% of your overall water. So I went and I tested. My favorite hockey team is the Detroit Red Wings, and I grew up in Michigan, and I started working at InBody, and I just decided one day that I wanted to call the hockey arena and see if they wanted to get an InBody. And the secretary put me straight through to the strength coach, and he was like, yeah, actually, I had one when I was at the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I just got a big budget, and we're building a new arena. I'd love one. And it was a couple months later, I wrote in the contract, I'm going to go out and train you all how to use this. So I show up there at training camp, and I test all the players. They're doing speed, they're doing agility, they're doing all kinds of these different activities. And 99% of them were between like 35.5 to 36.5% extracellular water. And the normal range is usually 36, 39. So they're on this lower end. They all have a lot of muscle, low amount of body fat. Their metabolism's really efficient. One that was a little bit higher was injured, and he wasn't doing all the other activities, and he had something happening where he had a lot of swelling happening in his body, and his overall score was a little bit higher than everybody else's. And then we also take that same score and we show it by each arm and leg and trunk. So we could actually see the specific leg where he was having the issue had more edema than all of the other ones. So we can now track that back into recoveries, because if we have a baseline for him, unfortunately we didn't, ongoing, we can track that change. The other end of the spectrum, somebody that has a metabolism that's less efficient, has more body fat, more visceral fat, less muscle, they might retain more water outside the cells, and they might be closer to 39%. So we can kind of see a range there. If somebody has lymphedema, we might be in the low 40s, heart failures, mid 40s, but we're just thinking about where's all the water relative to that. And then over time, no matter what modality of therapy you're doing, you can now see a snapshot of this over time and monitor that change.
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to do, lymph drainage is pretty important in our industry. It'd be really incredible to do like a flow presso before and after and see its impact on the extracellular water. So
Do you have clients that have those in their modalities?
Yeah, so typically we would see that in a particular clinic where they do focus on lymph drainage, but they don't necessarily do the body composition component, right? And so I don't think it's, because they probably consider it more along weights and body fat, not actually looking at how much water have we actually moved. So it'd be interesting to track that over time.
Yeah, so I think if somebody had like our 570 model or 380 model, those one or the 270, those ones would not show us the segmental edema. But if we had a 580, 770, or a 970, we could see segmental edema. So what I would recommend is that you do that before and after the treatment. And you could then have some objective data on the movement of the fluid. And when I started working here, part of our onboarding and training is that we actually do things like that, where they're like, okay, I want you to do 100 squats, test before you do the 100 squats, test after you do it, and then look at the change. And you can actually see the fluid movement, or we're going to do a bunch of push-ups and we're going to see that. So you can do these experiences yourself and also test the sensitivity of the tool, because it's super sensitive over time to monitor change like that. And it also reminds me of a story. This is kind of a tangent, but the Chicago Cubs, a baseball team, they bought the InBody, and their intention was they wanted to measure the pitcher's arm before the game. They want to have a baseline for him, but then measure it right before the game, and then measure it after the game, and look at the actual cellular breakdown of the phase angle from the 150, 200 pitches that he did, to know when are they going to put him back in the rotation, and use objective data to be able to show that. And that was right around the same time that they had actually built a new stadium, I think, and they really took off and they did well. But there's been a few teams that have adopted our technology, and the data insights have been able to help them tremendously.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a couple of times now phase angle. What do you mean by that particular metric?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I think it's going to become more prominent over the next years. It kind of made its way into a lot of research up to this point. And so the foundation of our technology is bioelectric impedance, which means that we're sending small, safe electrical currents through the body, and that happens at varying intensities. And at the root of it, when the current travels through the body, the time that it takes for the current to get from one point to another tells us basically how much resistance there is that's created there. So phase angle is the most granular measurement of that time factor of the resistance being created. So it can go from, like, if it was 0, the person wouldn't be dead. They wouldn't be alive. We're bioelectric beings, so we have conductivity inside of us. So if there's no conductivity, there's no phase angle. But if the score typically like 4 or 5 or lower, we don't really have any like specific ranges. I don't think research has gotten there. I've heard a lot of anecdotal things, but 4 and 5 and lower typically means that there's more cells that are dying than regenerating. And higher than that, I've seen it go up to like 12 or 15, especially in the trunk where there are more cells, where there's more muscle, healthier athletes like that. So over time, we can see the phase angle is an earlier indicator of the direction of change that's happening. So it's a more granular measurement that shows us a little bit earlier where we might be leading to with the muscle or the fat or the water values. And there's an inverse relationship also between that and the edema scores or the extracellular water scores. So if somebody is reducing their edema, they're likely increasing their phase angle. They work kind of in tangent with one another. But I think it's a metric that will start to get some more attention if we have anything to do about it specifically, or other competitors in the space that offer it too, to be able to show that and teach people about how it applies to things like hormone replacement therapies, longevity, cellular aging, a lot of things like that, alongside of other metrics like maybe grip strength or muscle mass or There's another output that we had within the last couple of years that we added an SMI score, or a skeletal muscle index score. So these are all different ways of looking at our risk of sarcopenia, or with the SMI score, similar to a BMI, where the BMI is height and weight. The SMI is taking the lean mass in your arms and your legs, and it's dividing it by your height squared. So it's standardizing, thinking about like, we ambulate, or we walk with our arms and our legs. So do I have enough of that? And then creating a score for it as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. My electrical engineering and signals and systems college work is all coming crashing back at me.
Yeah.
So, one of the questions that comes up quite a bit, obviously you've talked about kind of your different products, but if we kind of take a step back, bioimpedance analysis, I can go on Amazon and probably get a scale. Well, I could get a scale for about, $30, $50, versus some of the higher end stuff. Can you maybe just talk through kind of the differences and the why it's important to have, a more expensive product?
Yeah. Well, I think if we start most simply, yeah, you could probably get a home scale really cheap, or even the handheld ones. But a simple example with the handheld ones, those not telling you weight or anything, but it sends one current from one hand to the other. It can only go to the point it sends and receives. And those really only send 150 kilohertz frequency. So that's one measurement of resistance that I'm taking into, and it's compared in that case to your age that you enter into it, your gender. You probably tell it what your activity level is. You probably tell it, I don't know, some of them ask for ethnicity, and this is the same thing for like a foot scale too, where it might look like a fancy piece of technology, but really all it's doing is it's taking one little frequency measurement. When you stand on it, it goes from one foot to the other foot, or even if handles come out, it varies. So you'd have to look deeper into the technology, but a lot of them look pretty, but they're just really making a lot of assumptions based on things that you're entering into it. So if you were to ever change any of those, like if you have a home scale and you want to try this, try to change your age and do back-to-back tests and see what happens to your results. Or if it asks you like how active you are, put your grandma on it and say, okay, grandma, we're going to tell it you're active, and we're going to tell it now that you're sedentary, and see how it changes for her. So the variability and the lack of trust in a lot of those cases can cause some challenges. And then that even kind of comes up to more expensive. Like there's others in the marketplace that are like even have similar prices to ours with a similar kind of approach to the assumptions that are made. So our biggest claim to fame is that we don't use any empirical estimations to make assumptions based on things like your age or your gender or your activity level. And then we're actually also very early to come to market with 8 total electrodes, so 2 for each foot, 2 for each hand. When let's say the foot scale, you stand on it, it's really only sending one current starting point. Well, if your foot is in a different position each time you do the test, it might have a different starting point. So by having two places where the electrodes are, when I close my hand on it, I've got 2 places. Those currents are going to start at the same point in the arm to get a more accurate starting point for the measurement. And then we also use multiple frequencies. So I mentioned earlier some of the numbers of frequencies that we use, but basically lower frequencies stay outside the cells in the blood and the skin and the lymphatic system. And then 50 kilohertz is where we break the cellular membrane. And then above 50, the current is traveling through the cells. But the higher the frequency goes, the deeper into the cellular structure we can get resistance values for. But the current is always going to take the path of least resistance. And the way we do it, so we're going to get segmental measurements from that also, where we separate the trunk from the arms. So for each frequency that the measurement's doing, we're going to go from right hand to left hand. And then we're going to go right foot to left foot. And these are individual measurements at each frequency. Right hand to left hand, right hand to right hand to right foot, right hand to left foot, and then we're going to left hand to right foot, right hand, left hand. We're crossing, right? Like, so we're going to every other one. Lost myself and all that, but so we're getting all these different resistance points, and then that happens at every frequency. So in the 970 model, it happens at 1, 5, 50, 250, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So as we go up in those models, it gives us the ability to get more precise with the measurements and add more outputs. So on the 270, you might get 50 outputs, but you're up to like 70 on the 380, 90 on the 580, 100 on the 970. So really, we just try to meet you where you're at and try to figure out, like, what kind of outputs do you think you want? Do you want to grow into something more, or how might you also want to integrate this with the rest of the ecosystem that we have too, to get some maybe other streamlined data?
Yeah. So kind of building upon that, can you walk us through like a couple of your customers that are super successful and how they, hopefully more in the functional longevity weight loss space, and how do they kind of use the products, and how do they bundle it into their particular programs?
Yeah. I would say you want to set a baseline value for this assessment for you. Most people have a consultation value, and maybe that value goes up when you bring the technology in. But I would say if we're just isolating the body composition analyzer, I would probably say, what's your hourly rate? And it's probably going to take you 20, 30 minutes. Like, if somebody's just coming in to do this test, you're going to tell them about the results. And if this is a medical clinic, then we're probably going to make some recommendations and get to know you in that process, probably 20 or 30 minutes. So what is your time worth? And let's make sure we set a value for that. So you have that as a menu item. A lot of people would then say, well, national average that we would see is like $50 to $100 per test. And somebody might then say, okay, instead of one, I'm going to offer 3, and I'm going to bring it down. So let's say we set that rate at $100. So instead of 3 tests at $300, I'm going to do 3 tests at $200. So it's like a bundle. So I have an option for that also. But with whatever value we set, we can build that into a program. So it's part of that program. And I also have a podcast, and you came on it, and we're going to release your episode soon. And I've talked to a lot of other practitioners, and many people in medical clinics tell me, I've never charged for it. And I don't think I ever will charge for it, because it's just a standard part of what I do. It's part of the program. It helps build trust. It adds value. And then it just, it's just part of my business. I couldn't do what I do without it. It's like another vital sign that I get. So I'm getting baselines. I'm using that information to help set goals. I'm engaging people. I'm educating them about everything that's there. I'm tying it into the products and services that I offer. So I'm trying to upsell. I'm trying to cross-sell. I'm trying to build trust and value. And then over time, it helps people continue this dialogue or this engagement around where they're at. And then I can continue to use that to serve them over time too. So I think there's a couple ways we could think about it if we zoom out. One would be, am I getting a direct return on investment for this? Am I getting $1 every time somebody steps on the scale? In some businesses, like maybe a gym or a nutrition store, or there's a lot of other kind of maybe consumer-based businesses where people could come in, and we do want to do that because that's how the business model is set up. But in the medical field, it tends to be a lot more of the indirect return on investment, where it's more about the value that we're building and the way we're improving the care with the metrics, because all of the other modalities of therapy that we offer can get us more than me trying to say, I want to get $100 for you stepping on this, or me saying, do you want to pay me another $100 to do this? Maybe somebody says no, and then you don't get the information that you want or you need to show that this is going to help, reduce their, improve their gut permeability, because we're looking at the phase angle or the edema in the trunk, right? If we're talking about functional medicine, and I'm looking at these values, and I've got this whole other plan mapped out for you, and now I try to say I want a direct return on investment on this value, it might limit you from actually getting the information that you need. So I think it's more of just like a baseline value thing for it in a business. And there's so many ways I think we could track the return on investment from the tool, from how are we converting faster if we really want to get into the numbers, like if we want to track KPIs, right? Like, are we converting people faster? Are we getting more visits? Are we retaining members longer? I would say one of the strategies that, and you might think about how you could build this in your system. This could be cool, interplay for all the outputs that we offer. Create a spreadsheet, and on the spreadsheet in one column say, what is every output that the InBody gives me? And then right next to that, in a second column, write what product or service that you have connects to that output. And then in the next column, right, why are those connected? Why is that important? And how is it going to relate to that patient's journey? So when you're having a consultation with somebody and you're looking at these values, you can easily say, okay, maybe this is the first time, and I'm saying, your muscle mass is low, and it's really important. Muscle mass is super important because of this. It's our fountain of youth. Drives our metabolism, and we offer these programs that can help you, or these are the next steps along that journey for that. So we kind of create this if-then situation where as you're getting to know somebody in the process of like, hey, the InBody says you should probably reduce your body fat and build some lean mass. Does that sound like a goal that would align with you? Yeah, well, your muscle mass is low. This is probably how we can help you out and what we offer. Your muscle mass is low, your basal metabolic rate is low, and we offer this nutrition program. And what do you know about nutrition? What do you understand about your metabolism? And these are all questions that we can answer. And through the lens of this result sheet, it becomes a way for you to engage with somebody and ask questions and really transform the way that the conversation can and will happen. And I think the potential in what you are offering to your clients is so much greater on an indirect return on investment than it is on the direct one also. Yeah, no, it's
our initial common customers that came to us and brought this together, use it as a part of a membership model, right? Because they're doing regular lab testing, they're going to do an Oura ring, and then they also want to show the impacts of the body composition. Yeah, the impacts of the body composition, right? But it is also comprises more than just the testing or the supplementations or the medications. It also comprises getting that feedback to connect the dots for the individual. And that's what keeps them engaged into that membership model and not falling out, because they want to come back and see that they're still moving in the right direction.
Yeah, some people even actually name their InBodies. So, it's one guy called it the judge, right? And people were coming back to see the judge every time. It would he said it's his most reliable employee.
Yeah, so maybe kind of building on that as well, because what our first integration customer has a great use case around this, but coming back to, you can't avoid the discussion around semaglutide. Maybe walk us through the importance of how InBody helps with those weight loss programs and where blind spots can be if you're just looking at one number on the scale.
Well, I'm not legal counsel, and I don't know, you can't take my word for this, but a doctor once told me that he thought it was malpractice if somebody was giving someone a GLP-1 and not measuring their body composition. Because what if they are losing lean mass? What if they're not eating enough food? And long term, this really messes up their metabolism, and there's a greater risk there. Or maybe they're just getting it from online, or people are getting it a lot of different ways today. So it's I think probably the biggest misconception would just be people not caring about that awareness of the body composition and not really thinking about it in the components and how it relates to their overall health, and just thinking about it from the perspective, if I'm an individual and I'm a patient, I'm just thinking about it from a weight perspective, and I don't care what it takes for me to get it, but I'm actually causing, I'm developing sarcopenia in the process, or, I'm just, creating more poor health for vanity's sake. But, then I think from our perspective, we talk to so many people that are starting clinics because of this, and this is their sole application. They're just starting it because there's a drive for weight loss and there's a demand for it, and they're trying to catch the trend. And they'll probably also go out of business when it evens out and we're down kind of to the long tail. And we think about, and I try to coach people and really get to know their business and maybe encourage them, think holistically about it and how you can really offer, not just think about their weight, but also their nutrition and activity and their resilience and, their mindset, or what else can you do to help create harmony in their life or build community and connect with the soul of the patient. And I really think I see it in a lot of places. I feel so fortunate to have this job at InBody. I'm here at a conference now. I'll go to 25 this year, and that happens most years. And I get to kind of go to every corner of healthcare and interact with everybody. And I really feel this bubbling of practitioners in a lot of spaces, especially in your space, where they're really trying to get back to the soul of caring for the patient and really being kind of a centerpiece in their community. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're probably going to see some really great movements that are really delivering that kind of care. And I think the solution that you offer is one that enables somebody to do that in a way that they have that control and the power to.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just kind of one more question, just more on building on that. Talk a little bit about the importance of understanding fat distribution, and how do you guys help with that? We've kind of touched on it, but it'd be good to just tackle that topic directly.
Sure. So I guess we could think about fat from what total percentage it is of your body. So we're looking at an overall risk percentage of your body fat. So for a male, a normal range for body fat percentage would be a healthy range would be 10 to 20%. For a female, 18 to 28%. Sometimes those are debatable for people, but that's how we show it on our result sheets. And from there, we can break that down into how much lean mass, how much fat mass is in each arm and leg and trunk. So we get an idea of where that's at. And then the next step would be we get a visceral fat score, and that's going to tell us how many centimeters squared of visceral fat are in and around the organ. So that's compared to a CT scan. So if we took imagine your trunk is a loaf of bread, right? And I took one slice of bread out, and then I turned it and I was looking at it, and I'm looking down in and around my organs. And what the CT scan does is it counts the centimeters squared of fat that's in and around the organs. So we report it as that on there. Research shows that we want to have less than 100 centimeters squared. Most physicians I talk to probably want their patients between 30 and 70 centimeters squared. I talked to the Detroit Pistons one time, and one of the questions they asked me was how low is too low on the visceral fat? And we kind of came to the conclusion that we probably want a little bit more, because the function of what they're doing, they might get slammed around, and it's probably good to have some support for the muscles and the organs, but kind of varies on your function. But over time, we want to try to keep it below 100, but it does tend to go up as we age. And I think having that awareness is really going to show us your health risk over time. And I often encourage people this might be something cool for you too, to think about how you can integrate maybe on a visceral fat tile, if it was something like that. Like, one is, can you print off a picture of a healthy CT scan and an unhealthy CT scan with visceral fat looking on the organs? And the other would be, if you search for visceral fat on the heart on search engine, and one is a healthy heart, and then the other heart, you can't really see the heart because it's caked in fat and it's essentially choking the organ. So which metabolism do you want? Which function do you want? So I think there's a lot of ways that we can impress upon somebody the health risk that might lead to downstream. The mechanism of action is that they understand their risk and they want to. Like, somebody could change because something really impactful happens in their life and they're like, I have to change. Or somebody could come along and they could connect with that person in a way that shows them a number or shows them a picture, or they hear the words that enable them to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go down this path. And those are just some ways I think that could help to facilitate that.
Yeah. Maybe just switching gears a little bit before we switch to questions. Tell me a little bit about your coaching and your approach as a practitioner. How do you like to think about working with people?
One of my best friends actually taught me an acronym, and I like to share this acronym as kind of like how I think about how I can serve people, but it's also a lens of how I like to teach people how they can think about how they can serve people, because not everybody needs the same thing. And I think getting to, outside of building rapport and building a relationship with somebody, a lot of times it's about figuring out where are the easiest opportunities to help. So the acronym is EMACK. So E stands for efficiency. Does the person need help with efficiency? Maybe they kind of understand what to do, but they just want somebody to help them, make their plan a little bit more efficient. M, motivation. Where can I help motivate you? And that could be many different ways, kind of diving into different aspects of who they are, what's your purpose, what's your mission, what are your goals, and really understanding what is going to get you there or what might not be helping get you there, and understanding that process. A is for accountability. So once we have a good idea of where you want to go, how you want to get there, how can we make that easy to be able to do, or what can I do to help you to be able to do that? C is for commitment. A lot of people don't commit to things, or it's challenging to commit with so many things going on, or maybe any of those other things could be misaligned, so they don't. And then K is for knowledge. So just sharing more knowledge. And I think I try to think of myself as more like a strategic health advisor to people, to just show up and be a friend and kind of reach into my toolbox and share what I think would be most helpful for them. So it kind of looks different for a lot of people based on where they're at. But I think that's how I like it to be, more not so cookie cutter, but like I can think on my feet more, and I can have fun, and I can interact with people in different ways, and really think from their perspective. And even in sales at InBody, I always think of like, I'm more of a strategic consultant to you, and how do I just swing around and be at your side of the table and look at what you're doing, is to not just say, here's a tool for you, but also here's how this tool relates to everything else that you're already doing operationally, marketing, sales. It's more than just bringing a tool in, I think, a lot of times. So I try to take that approach in my whole life. Some people would say I probably shouldn't do it with all my friends all the time and just relax, but I think it's just so innate in who I am at this point. So
yeah,
we're kind of refining our friendships.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. Our team's been getting some great questions from the audience. If you're watching, this is a replay. Feel free to post your questions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a live stream. So first question, for someone that's never used a body composition tool before, what's the experience like? Is it something that our clients are comfortable with right away?
Well, I would say operationally, when you bring it in, at least from InBody's perspective, we have an InBody Academy. So you go through a course, and the course shows you how to prepare. There's videos, text, quizzes. You end up with a certification at the end of it. So how to prepare to run a test, run the test, understand the result sheet. So you come out of that with a basic understanding of, okay, I can go and I can do this test, or I can take somebody through. And it's important that when somebody first does do the test, that you explain to them what's happening. You're getting on a body composition analyzer. You have to take your shoes and socks off now. We're going to wipe off your hands and your feet. If you ever come to a conference and you come, we'll show you at the booth, right? We'll take you through this experience too. But we also have a customer experience team who can do virtual trainings with individuals or with teams. And I think we do a great job at teaching you how that process can go. And it's super simple. The device is ready to go out of the box, and you can plug it in, and you can take the InBody Academy while it's on the way, and you could run a test. I think if you're explaining to people along the way how each step goes, then it really becomes something that it's easy for them to come in next time and do it on their own, and you don't have to walk them through it every time. And it really becomes something that helps create more efficiency in your business that way too. I think if we just isolate the body composition test, that's super simple. But if we then take that and we extend it to the conversation that we're having around the result sheet, I think that takes a little bit more technical training of, like, you should probably have, if I'm talking to somebody that has a clinic, you should probably have all of your team test. And then we should practice talking about these results. Maybe in that process, before you launch it and you open it up to all your clients, we should come up with some common questions that people might have. Because if you think of the question, somebody else might have it as well. And we might want to create a resource that we can have. Like I'm suggesting a picture of visceral fat. Who knows what visceral fat is? Maybe not everybody does. Maybe people do, or they don't have a clear understanding of it. So I think understanding one result sheet is the next step. And now we're looking at side by side 2 result sheets, and we're looking for changes that are happening from test to test. And we're trying to think about what therapy and modality happened in between. That's kind of a technical process too, and it takes time. The learning curve is not like the learning curve to get it in, do the test is one thing. But from there, I think there's more steps that you can take. And that's why I started the podcast, because I was like, I want to really dive in and help more people understand what tips, tricks, tools, resources, other things that people have done to accelerate that growth for them, and kind of open up more discussions about things like this, that I can talk to people on the front end of a sale and they get really excited and they buy it. And then, they get it in and they don't have as much success as they wish they would. So that's a great place to go to learn more also.
Yeah. Next question. How do you address mindset and behavioral barriers when coaching clients towards their health goals?
I think I'm getting curious. I think I just really like being curious, and just understanding elements. I'm big on questions, and I think I like to just ask silly questions sometimes, or direct questions. So, if we're talking about somebody's mindset or their health goal, just asking for affirmation, like, is that your health goal, or does this affect your mindset? And just kind of bringing to light some things that are maybe obvious, but not so obvious. So it becomes part of the dialogue. And I think in that, to some, I might seem like I might be insensitive, because I kind of, the questions that I ask at times can be just very direct, and people that are sensitive might take offense to that. So I think I've kind of learned how to come in a little bit softer and think a little bit more meta about my questions, like beyond the question before I ask the question. But I think getting curious with questions is always where I go back to. And then telling stories. I think people learn from stories so much, and especially if they're vulnerable stories or they're stories about others, and that's something that they can relate to, that gives them more confidence, or helps somebody see a path of what is possible for themselves too.
Yeah, great. Next question: how frequently should clients be measuring their body composition to see meaningful trends without getting overwhelmed by the data? We've seen this in some of our weight loss clinics where they worry about people checking in too quickly and, getting demotivated based upon, daily feedback where they may have just some random water retention on a day. So what is kind of the sweet spot that you found?
Well, I would say if we're talking about just like overall general health, I would say at least everybody should measure one time annually. And if you've got a clinic, it's probably a really great way for you to just say, hey, everybody gets one scan for free, or a gym, or like whatever your business is, one scan for free annually. And the way you do that is you book an appointment. And if you've got a calendar linking system, do you have one built in your system, Jeremy? Is there like an appointment?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can go in there, right? And we can set up and we can say, everybody gets one for free. At any point, you can come here and you can set up your one for free. Beyond that, if you're really trying to make a health change, kind of depends on your urgency and how intense you are. I think the effort you're putting in should line up with perhaps the amount that you're measuring, because I think what you suggested in the question was that we don't get kind of too overwhelmed with the data, where if it's too short, then it could not really give us the intended outcome that we want. Because what most people don't realize is that body composition shifts 3 to 5 pounds sometimes in a day, depending on what you're eating, drinking, a lot of different things happening in your life, flying on planes or exercising. And just measuring in the morning one time, and then you measure in the evening another, that could be a 3 to 5 pound swing. And now we're just talking about you've increased 2% body fat, but in reality, it's just going to level out in another day or two. So I think with things like just general fitness, every month or two is probably healthy. But if you're not really doing much to change, then, maybe every quarter, biannually, but at least annually. But if we're looking at things like when I was talking about like that hockey player that had the injury, well, if we're looking at water changes and we're looking at edema or swelling, then we should probably go and look at that sooner and be able to show that change too.
Yeah, definitely.
I need to plug my laptop.
Yep. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that even in my individual health journey, I found that the days that I lost most weight were my rest days, which was a really interesting trend. And that was just kind of a strange thing, just based upon making my own dietary changes, reducing the inflammation. And then I've also told the story quite a bit that I have a particular reactivity to beef protein. So when I was in Austin, I'd go go get barbecue and get brisket. So I'm reactive to cow's milk and particularly US based grain beef. I would put on 5 pounds the next day, but it would be gone 3 days later. Right. And so those types of aberrant transitions can be challenging, but if you now let that, hey, look, it's just a food thing, it's an inflammation thing. And then you kind of know that. Yeah.
We have another integration with a company called Life-Based Solutions, where we could actually put some real-time data to that, because what they have is, if anybody's out there, and Jeremy, have you ever tracked the food that you eat? Have you ever logged it on something like MyFitnessPal or Objectively?
Yeah.
So what they do is they've created that, but on steroids. So on the back end, the provider gets a dashboard. And from that dashboard, when you enroll a patient, the body composition data comes in and it helps set up a macro plan. So from that, we can see proteins, fats, carbs, sodium, sugar, water, fiber. And these are all things that we're able to track over time. And From there, you set a macro plan for the person, and then they log the food on the app, and meal by meal, day by day, they get scores. One is a compliance score, 1 to 5, on how well they align with the macronutrient plan that you've set for them. And then the other is a color-coded system, if it's green or yellow or red, with the quality of the food in there. So proteins that are maybe from a beef source might be that have more dry, lean mass are better than maybe a protein shake that is doesn't have as much of the dry, lean mass. Or the quality of the carb might be higher in fiber, gives me a better quality score in the carb. And then when they log those meals, they see the scores. So the system helps coach them manually. So I actually use a system myself where I'll get to the end of a meal and be like, I'm under eating carbs. I underate carbs last meal. I'm under eating again today. It's the end of the day. I'm going to add another like half a sweet potato. And I go eat the sweet potato. Ping, I got a 5-star score and I'm on. And like in real time, it can help me with it. But then on the back end, a coach can see all that. So every time somebody comes back and they test in on the body composition analyzer, the coach gets a report that says, Jeremy just tested, and here's the exact change of his weight and muscle and fat and water. And then we could look at that and we could say, Jeremy, did you have that brisket again? Because your edema went up, and you drew your sodium was high, or like whatever it is. And then through the system, you can actually do the coaching. So there's communication portals where you can embed videos and you can communicate. And then we actually just came out where we do this with the home scale as well. So we could do this virtually with patients as well. And coaches that use this system can do like 100 to 300 clients in a month and just spend like 15, 20 minutes reviewing the data as long as they're checking in on it. So that's a super cool other integration that we have that helps with nutrition objectively too.
Yeah, super cool stuff. Last question. When working with clients using InBody results with what suggestions can help clients keep from getting discouraged by certain numbers like high fat mass or low muscle mass, maybe even being resistant to getting on the InBody itself, to understand that, like, using kind of your NLP background, and, how would you kind of help a practitioner coach somebody through that?
Yeah. I always ask this question on my podcast to my guests too, because it's like, there's a human behind the data. And the earlier version of myself was like, I would data dump and I would just share the information. And I remember showing up to a conference and I did this, and I turned and I looked up and I was like so excited that I had shared it. And then the lady was crying and I was like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. But it was like, I didn't meet the person where she was at. So I think what I would recommend to somebody is that you ask somebody, have you ever measured your body composition before we even go into this? Is this something you've ever done before? This is part of what we do here. We think it's helpful because we get to, see your progress. But is this something that you would think would be helpful in your journey? Or why do you think this would be helpful in your journey? Because then we're getting buy-in, we're getting acceptance, we're kind of moving along. Sometimes people are like, no, I don't want to see it. And what we might do is I might cover the screen while the test is happening, so they're not actually looking at it. And I just get the data on the back end, or the provider does, and we don't talk about it this time. I'm not going to sit down and I'm not going to go over all this information. I'm just getting a baseline. And then, maybe I build enough trust with you and we build enough rapport, or we've got enough other things going on where I invite you again and I say, do you want to do this test? Or I'm using it, and I think in a more tactfully that way where I connect with the human. So that's kind of the foundation of it. And then also when interpreting the result sheet, you don't have to do the whole result sheet every time. You might just touch on, like in the first time, it might just cover weight and muscle and fat and what your goals are. And then there's all kinds of other data we can talk about next time, or the other times after that. Or we might not even have some real insights based on phase angle yet, because we haven't done any care to see what kind of changes might happen. So those come in down the road. So we don't have to worry about them now.
Awesome. Well, listen, this has been a great discussion. I want to thank all of you who joined us today and those who asked questions. If you're watching this as a replay, you can still post your questions and get them answered in the comments below. Thank you again, Bradley, for joining me today. Where can people find out more about InBody?
Well, we have a great page that we share together on our website. So I can see, I think it's on the screen now.
Yep.
On our website, it's inbodyusa.com/biocanic. And you also have one on your page, biocanic.com/InBody. So I think feel free to go there and reach out to us, or you can connect them with me, and I'm happy to help people along. And I thank you very much for your time here and allowing me to come on and share my joy.
Yeah, like I said, this has been a great integration. Our practitioners are loving it. And people who jump on it, they just say this has just been a great tool for their practice and drives a ton of value. So thank you again. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Coming up next week, you can join us for our bi-weekly best practices on Tuesday at 10 a.m. and our bi-weekly networking coffee circle on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. And join us for another HICS live stream in 2 weeks. So awesome. Thanks, Bradley.